In 1942, a ship was torpedoed and swallowed by the Atlantic. Only one man made it out alive, clinging to life on a tiny raft with nothing but a few scraps of food, his wits, and a will to survive stronger than the sea itself. This is the haunting true story of Poon Lim, a man who refused to die. His struggle would become the longest survival at sea ever recorded, and one of the most unbelievable sagas of World War II. And now, let's venture into the depths where shadows dance and secrets lurk. Poon Lim was born on March the 8th, 1918 on Hainan Island, just off the southern coast of China. It was a chaotic time. World War I was still raging, and a dreadful flu pandemic was sweeping across the globe. But somehow, despite all of that, Lim's family managed to live a quiet, peaceful life fishing in the Beibu Gulf, just north of their island home. That peace, however, wouldn't last. By the late 1920s, tensions with Japan was rising fast. A full-scale invasion of China was starting to feel unavoidable. Lim's father was worried, and for good reason. He feared his sons would be forced into the army to fight a brutal war they likely wouldn't survive. So, in a desperate move to protect his family, he uprooted them to Malaysia. Once there, they tried to settle back into a simple life fishing once again to get by. But young Poon Lim wasn't content with that life. To him, it felt like treading water, too routine, too quiet. He wanted more. So when he came of age, he made a bold choice. He decided to leave everything behind to join the fight against the Japanese imperialism. Lim signed on as a cabin boy with Britain's merchant navy, hoping it would give him a purpose and a taste of freedom. But what he found at sea wasn't what he imagined. Asian sailors like Lim were treated poorly. They were given the hardest, dirtiest jobs, paid the least, and constantly disrespected by many of the British officers on board. The racism and abuse wore him down. By 1937, he'd had enough. Lim walked away from life at sea and found work as a mechanic in Hong Kong. It gave him a brief moment of stability, but not for long, because in late 1941, with another Japanese invasion looming, the ocean would once again call him back. In just a few short years, Poon Lim had already managed to dodge more than one Japanese onslaught, but his luck was quietly running out. In early 1942, he signed on as a steward aboard the Benlomond, a 420-foot, 5,400-ton armed merchant ship. It was part of Britain's merchant navy, delivering supplies to Allied forces during World War II, a critical job, but a dangerous one. On November the 23rd, 1942, the Benlomond was nearing the end of the 2-week trip from Cape Town, South Africa to Suriname. From there, the plan was to head 1,500 miles north to New York City. Now, while the ship was armed, the weapons on board were light, not built to take on serious threat. Everyone on board knew if they came across an enemy warship or a submarine, they'd be in big trouble. And to make matters worse, the Benlomond was slow, really slow. That day, its ballast tanks were filled with seawater to help it balance in rough waves, making it even heavier. Plus, the ship was traveling alone, across a well-known supply route that was regularly targeted by German U-boats. And just as feared, around 2 p.m., a German submarine spotted the ship. It was 250 feet long, fully loaded, and ready for combat. The captain wasted no time. A message was sent through the sub, and the crew sprang into action. Within seconds, 2 torpedoes nearly 2 feet wide were launched straight at the Benlomond. They tore through the water, closing in fast, and then, impact. Both torpedoes slammed into the hull just below the waterline. The explosions were massive. The ship didn't stand a chance. In the chaos that followed, nearly all 54 men on board were either killed instantly or went down with the ship. Somehow, by pure instinct or blind luck, Poon Lim managed to grab a nearby life jacket. He jumped into the freezing Atlantic and swam away from the wreck. But while he survived the blast, he was now alone, with nothing but endless ocean in every direction. Disoriented and exhausted, Lim floated for hours. Wave after wave battered him as he fought to stay conscious, and just as he was about to give up hope, something appeared. It was an empty wooden raft about 8 feet by 8 feet, drifting silently nearby. No one else in sight, no rescue on the horizon, but it was enough. Lim pulled himself aboard just before nightfall with no idea what came next. He was roughly 250 miles from the nearest land to the south, but the current was dragging him westward, toward the coast of Brazil, which was more than twice as far. And now, stranded in the middle of the Atlantic, his survival would come down to one thing: staying calm, and making the most of whatever he had. Thankfully, the raft wasn't completely empty. Tucked away inside was a small survival kit. Inside, Lim found a flare gun, 2 electric cooking pots, a broken flashlight, a few chocolate bars, a bag of sugar cubes, and an 11-gallon jug of fresh water. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. At first, Lim believed it wouldn't take long for someone to realize the Benlomond had gone down. After all, the ship's route was known, and it wasn't late arriving just yet. Surely someone would notice. Surely a rescue would be launched soon. At least, that's what he hoped. But in the back of his mind, he knew better. The war had stretched resources thin, and in the grand scheme of things, a single supply ship with a mostly foreign crew probably wasn't anyone's top priority. So Lim prepared for the worst. He started rationing everything. He collected rainwater whenever he could and made every drop count. Luckily, his background gave him an edge. He had grown up fishing with his family, and he knew the ocean would provide, if you knew how to ask. After going through the raft supplies, Lim got to work. He stripped copper wire from the flashlight and twisted it into fishing line. Then he pulled nails from the raft to fashion crude hooks. For bait, he mixed up biscuit crumbs and sugar cubes, rolled them into dough balls, and packed them around the hooks. He dropped the lines overboard and waited. Didn't take long. Lim caught his first fish and filleted it with a sharpened tin lid. He ate it raw right then and there. The scraps, guts, skin, and bones were saved as bait for the next catch. But Lim didn't stop there. He dried some of the meat in the sun, preparing for the possibility that things might get worse before they got better. And they did get worse. In the days and weeks that followed, the Atlantic showed no mercy. Fierce storms slammed into the raft. Winds howled, waves crashed. Time and time again, Lim's precious supplies were washed away. Even the fish he had carefully dried were blown overboard or soaked through. He grew weaker. Sometimes he was so exhausted and dehydrated he could barely stay conscious. But he kept going. Then the fish disappeared. For days his lines come up empty. With no other choice, Lim turned to the only living thing still nearby, the seagulls. They circled his raft constantly, and he started catching them. Not eager to eat them raw, Lim sliced the meat into strips and laid it out to dry, turning it into tough, leathery jerky. He saved every usable scrap. Blood, guts, feathers, it all became bait to lure fish, and sometimes even small sharks. And every so often, something big would flop into the raft. Suddenly it was a fight for his life. He'd wrestle the creature on the slippery boards, trying not to get bitten or knocked overboard, until he could finally land a hit and club it unconscious. Through it all, Lim's hunger and thirst only got worse. He was sunburned beyond belief and seasick almost constantly. But strangely, none of that compared to the emotional toll of what came next, being ignored over and over by potential rescuers. The first time a large freighter passed so close to his raft that he could have hit it with a rock. Crew members even came out on deck and looked right at him. But they didn't react to his desperate shouting, waving, or the flare he fired. And just like that, the ship continued on its way, leaving him floating alone in the middle of the Atlantic. After how he had been treated aboard the Benlomond, Lim couldn't help but assume that they ignored him because he was Chinese. But the truth was likely even worse. At the time, German U-boats were known to leave decoy survivors in the water, a deadly trap meant to lure rescuers into torpedo range. Because of that, many merchant ships were under strict orders not to stop. for anyone. Later, a group of U.S. Navy planes flew directly overhead. One dropped a buoy nearby, a clear sign they'd spotted him and might come back. But before that could happen, a violent storm rolled in and swept the buoy away. Once again, he was alone. Then came the most surreal encounter of all. A German U-boat passed right by his raft. It may have even been the same one that sank the Benlomond. The crew took a break from target practice on seagulls just to stare at him as they drifted past. Not a single word, not a single hand offered, just silence, and then they were gone. At that point, Lim was physically drained and mentally shattered. He truly believed he was going to die, either of starvation or just fade away under the endless sky. These were his darkest moments, but somehow, even then, hope found its way back. One day, the deep blue sea began to change. It turned a cloudy green, a subtle shift, but to Lim, it meant everything. As a trained fisherman, he knew this meant the water was getting shallower and that land might be finally close. Then, on April the 5th, 1943, exactly 133 days after the Benlomond had gone down, Lim spotted a fishing boat in the distance. It was real. Within hours, he was rescued by a group of Brazilian fishermen. His nightmare was finally over. Lim had spent nearly 5 months, 19 weeks, adrift in the Atlantic. He had lost around 20 pounds and was severely dehydrated, but incredibly, he was still alive. He spent the next month in a Brazilian hospital recovering, rehydrating, and slowly regaining his strength. And against all odds, doctors said he was in remarkably good condition. Once word got out, the quiet fisherman from Hainan Island became a global legend. Eager to capitalize on Lim's sudden fame, the British Council arranged for him to travel to London in the fall of 1943. On the way, he made brief publicity stops in Miami and New York, where word of his survival had already spread like wildfire. Not long after, Lim stood before King George VI, who awarded him the British Empire Medal for his service in the Merchant Navy. But that wasn't all. The Royal Navy took note of the incredible techniques Lim had used to stay alive and incorporated many of them into a survival manual, which was later issued to sailors and airmen around the world. Lim went on to embark on an international speaking tour, sharing his harrowing tale with spellbound crowds from every corner of the globe. Eventually, he chose to settle in the United States, but at first, he was denied citizenship because the Chinese immigration quota had already been met that year. That's when Senator Warren Magnuson of Washington State stepped in. He pushed for an act of Congress that would raise the quota by exactly one. That one space was for him, and just like that, he became a U.S. citizen. When someone told him that no person in history had survived longer at sea in a raft, Lim simply replied, "That's a record I hope no one ever breaks." He spent the rest of his life quietly in Brooklyn, New York, and passed away in 1991 at the age of 72. Poon Lim's journey is more than just a survival story. It's a haunting reminder of human fragility, the brutality of war, and the sheer will to live. Against impossible odds, a quiet man with no weapons, no radio, and no allies endured some of the most tragic conditions imaginable. Not just surviving, but turning his suffering into something the world could learn from. In a world too quick to forget its quiet heroes, Lim's story stands as proof that courage doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in silence on the open sea.
And that will do it for today. Thank you for watching and hanging out. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. But until then, blessings and positive energy to you, love.